So
you can check it out. So it's
anybody
just
have any question for our speakers?
Don't give it back.
Okay. Young man in the front, hang on. Wait for it. Here you go.
Okay. All right, so first I have a question for Victoria. So I'm wondering how you managed to balance this need to protect people from scams and fraud with protecting people's privacy. What kind of know your customer policy do you implement? And also, with these Bitcoin ATMs, you are really giving Bitcoin like a physical presence in the real world. This must give you some insights into, other ways that you can leverage this to, to help people. And Chris mentioned the remittances. I'm curious what other things you're looking at like that.
Yeah, so great first question as far as kind of like what we have to really know about our customers and what kind of our policies are. So there are certain things that we have to know for each level of how much a person is transacting. Obviously, the more they're transacting, the more we need to verify for them. And for certain transactions, we really need to know who they are, right? But for any bottom line transaction, we basically need to know your name, your phone number, and just a couple other item lines. But basically, it's not going to be 100% private. We've got a camera there. We know who you are. We know if you're a return customer. So really, we do know our customers very well. As far as your second question, we are definitely looking and working right now to offer more services with these kiosks, right? Because it is very tangible, it's very approachable, and remittances is kind of the next step. So that is something that we're working on with a partner who's international already, as far as how can we allow, the people in the U.S. Who are sending so much money through Western Union and Zoom and all these other really expensive services over blockchain through stable coins, so that the transaction cost is really low and it's instantaneous. So that's kind of our next step and where we're going.
I have a question for Nigel. The question is when you're using AI to figure out the documents, are you creating an insurance layer on top of that for obviously there's a area of uncertainty of defining these transactions. Are you it seems like would be an ideal smart contract type area for an insurance for this transaction.
There are multiple. Oh yeah.
For the mic.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, there are multiple fees that are on a trade financed transaction, right? And insurance fees are some of those, which would benefit from this. But also the other part could be of the question is, if we're taking responsibility for verifying the documents conform, they check and they're compliant, then you do take a financial responsibility on that, and you could insure that potentially. So but the world of trade finance requires 4 eyes. So there's always a maker and a checker with different names, but that's a typical name. So the person looks at the document first, transcribes all the information, and then it's duplicated by a checker, and they've got a match. And so we're focusing on the maker, but eventually when we replace the checker as well, that there would be a legal liability or financial liability there, which could be covered by insurance. Does that answer the question? Yep.
I have a follow-up question. Did you do the math on how many employees will be replaced? And if you didn't do the math, what does your gut tell you? How many people will be made redundant by this?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a secret, because there's a different pitch really to a customer than it is to maybe an investor. But so investors want to know how much money you're going to save your clients so they come on board. But when you're selling this, it's very dependent on the maker and checker, the trade finance community, the officers being part of it. So, and really the technology supports this principle I have is that we want to make the makers super makers, right? We want to make them, rather than robots, we want to make them exoskeletons, so they become able to do 4 or 5, well, actually 3 to 7 times is the number, the volume of trades they can do today. So the answer to that is, rather than cutting people and do the same amount of trade, you can just do more trade. Yeah, well, the opportunity is in the, especially with the tariffs now, and the trade war with China, the opportunity is with the other Asian countries, where letters of credits are more important and are more complicated because they're not known as well as maybe the exporters from China. And so one of our customers in Singapore is just limited. They can't find enough makers and checkers because it's a very skilled job. You've got to be almost, semi-legal, like a paralegal, and it's boring. It's boring work. And so the newer generations don't want to do this job, and the older generation's retiring. So it's like this enables them to expand the people they have. So not cutting any people out of the workforce.
On that note, does anybody remember what computers were in the beginning? Human beings, yes. They were human beings. I walked into an office once back in the old world, and they still had pictures on the wall how this office looked like before there were cubicles. They had standing desks, and there were people that doing nothing else but writing numbers into ledgers. Rows and rows and rows of people standing on desks, writing numbers in ledgers. These people were called computers. I mean, what an inhumane thing to do, right? That's your bank teller.
Don't know how I can follow that up, Chris. Question for Andre. You started talking about it a little bit, but then you went in a different direction. The review process, so kind of online reviews of the trips. Interested to know what you're doing there. I mean, an online review is a form of digital asset, right? It has to have some authentication behind it too. So just wondering what you guys are doing in that space.
Wait for it.
Current implementation of a prototype doesn't have review yet. So right now we're focusing only on value transfer and protecting people from scammers. So reviews will be implemented in the future with the next release. And we're planning to add them to the blockchain as well. So only people who were involved in the transaction are able to record the review.
Yeah, and I think Andre needs more volunteers as well, so you can see him afterwards. Do you have a question?
Sorry, I forgot your name from BTM.
Victoria?
Victoria.
Yes.
Are you guys going to be doing cross-chain transactions, or is that something you already do? Like if I wanted to buy a Bitcoin and I walked up with, I think, 10 or 12 ETH or whatever the exchange rate is, could I exchange that instead of using cash with your machines?
Good question. I'll wait for the microphone. So that's not something that we are really focused on. There are two-way machines where you can actually sell your, Bitcoin or Litecoin and receive cash. So there's that option. But right now, the machines are really retrofitted for like a cash, an ATM-like experience. I'm sure there are a lot of options out there to do something like that, where you can make that transaction. But right now, we're actually, like I said, focused on retrofitting the machines for a remittance transaction more so. But that is an interesting option to look at for the future.
I got a question for me. This is for Victoria.
Yes.
Have you formed any partnerships with other types of machine vendors, either dispensing pharmaceuticals or like Redbox for movies?
That's another great question, because I know, I think it was CoinMe and Coinstar. They're kind of in that partnership. So that's something that we have gotten into preliminary conversations about, especially looking at casinos and things like that. But of course, there are a lot of regulatory issues that we just want to ensure that, it's hard because we don't know a lot of what is going to be regulated. So we've been very careful about what kind of partnerships we enter into. Right now, like I said, our next focus is really remittances, and we are partnering with a financial company that does offer like a debit card for the unbanked. And so that's a kind of a different approach of a partnership. But as far as kind of like the Redbox and the other kind of kiosk companies, that's not where we're going right now, but we have explored it in the past.
Yeah. If you don't watch him already yet, watch Andreas Antonopoulos. He has a good saying. The blockchain is unbanking the banked. You're the good.
Just a quick question. Is this machine two-way? Can you put Bitcoin, get dollar, and dollar Bitcoin? Or
Not right now.
Thanks.
Is that a federal issue, or is that just a business choice?
Business choice.
So hi, my name is Brian. I'm from Blockchain at UCI, and we're kind of like just a group of students very interested in like blockchain in general and like how companies go about the process of like picking out blockchains and how they position themselves for like new blockchains too. And I was kind of curious about how you guys do that. Like for example, Amazon, Microsoft, they both kind of like publish their new type of blockchains they're going to be building, and I just want to know how you guys position yourself to like interact with these different blockchains out there, as well as how you went through the process of choosing the blockchain service that you're using right now. That's
Biting my tongue all the way to the panel. Who wants to go first? Tim, we start over there.
What's the question?
Oh, the question was, how do you choose your blockchain? Did I summarize too cruel?
yeah, pretty much. And position for a new blockchain.
And position for new blockchains.
Yeah, I mean, so our concern is the.
I have the panel.
I'm all right,
You're
yeah.
good.
So our most important criterion is the transaction cost, because we want to do lots of transactions. Now, the card is going to be doing the off-chain transactions, but eventually they have to go up to the blockchain. So, for example, with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter if we chain 10 transactions, send them up all at once. We haven't saved any money, really. So for us, it's really the cost of transactions. That's our biggest concern. The latency is not a big concern because we're going to do that. We're going to make it fast on the card.
Andre?
When I started my project about a year ago, Ethereum was probably the best option because there were a lot of activities, I mean development activities, a lot of projects going on. Right now, that decision was proven to be true because of most of the stable coins, and they run on the Ethereum main network.
Yeah, as far as us, it doesn't really apply.
Right, and from my company's point of view, really, I think we were talking earlier about, I'm trying to think, it was with you, Eric, I think about the interoperability between multi-blockchains. So we're an app that sits on top of multiple ones.
Yeah. So my 5 cents to that is, for us, it's really important because in the very nature, blockchains are open source. And for open source, the community is the driver, right? So which blockchain has the largest community and has an advantage over the others in that aspect, right? From a proprietary perspective, if I'm Microsoft and I throw 1,000 people on a particular blockchain idea, if you want to call it blockchain, then there's probably 10,000 people on the Ethereum blockchain that volunteer their time. They don't work 9 to 5, right? They don't ask for any salary, and they're just doing it for the sake of that software. And I was talking to Nigel about that earlier. If you haven't been at the early beginnings of how open source came about, the one very first example might be the first example of open source software was Apache, which is the web server that most of the time when you look at a website, that's powering this particular website from the server's perspective. And it's it's not called Apache because it's a reference to the Native American tribe here. It's called Apache because it was a patch of, at the time, the IBM web server that IBM was trying to sell, and that was so buggy that people started contributing patches to that software, and that pool of patches became what's now Apache. So that's the origins of open source software.
Question for Tim. Why do you want to I don't think you really explained why you wanted to create a credit card for using Bitcoin and all that when we saw in your video you created a mobile app just to do all the transactions itself while just connecting to the phone itself the card.
Right.
So what's just stopping us from just using that mobile app to do all of the transactions rather than using a card?
Right, so two things. I guess I've got the microphone on here. So two things. One is the security. We can't do the off-chain payments with a phone. It's too easy we can't guarantee that it's not double spending. So the level of control over the software that we get by having it in our own chip will let us do the off-chain payment. So that's one thing. The other thing is in the say the developing world, phones are valuable. Not everybody has one. We think we can get the card down to less than $5. Then it becomes viable as something that can be much more widely distributed. And we had one of our partners was trying to get the payment business going in Mexico. And because people didn't have phones, I don't know how many, he distributed hundreds of Android phones to all the little shops in Mexico to try to jumpstart his mobile payment business. And what happened is that they all sold the phones because, hey, I can get $80 for this, I'll sell the phone. And so the advantage of the card, it does nothing else. And so it's not going to be a thing to steal. It's going to be a payment device. It's going to do that one thing.
Yeah, follow
So if you're just going to use the simple card, what's the biggest problem in mass producing them? Are you trying to still reach is it economies of scale, which is your biggest issue at the moment? And
no, so to produce our own chip, that's about I don't know, $6 or $7 million building the production system. Once you built it, you can stamp them out for a couple dollars a piece, and that also dramatically reduces the power consumption. So once it's running our own chip, we think it can go for 2 years on what small battery we can get inside these cards. So it's a big upfront cost to build the jigs and the procedures and to get the contracts with the different facilities generally in Asia that will do the work. Yeah, so I think, does that answer it?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a follow-up question. So what is your business? Is it just selling the cards?
Well, that's what
You sell the car, you're done?
That's a good question because one of our founders is a chip guy. He just wants to build chips and sell cards for whatever anyone wants to do with them, whether it's a national ID card or whatever. So he wants to build cards and sell them for anything. The other founder and myself, we want to build more of a vertical payment business to use this card. And we would do a percentage of the transaction cost. So we want to partner with the mobile payment providers around the world, have them issue this as an adjunct to their system that runs on mobile phones, and they take a certain percentage of the transaction. We'll ask for a...
Yeah, because your first business model is that if you don't have any patent, anybody can do it.
Right,
But
right.
if you do it vertically, you have a business.
Right, exactly. And
one last question, and then the bell rings 9 o'clock.
Hey, this is just a general question for the Airbnb and TradeSun. But just in general, like, what are the trade-offs that you guys are making for being decentralized? So, like, I guess one of the biggest examples for like trade finance would be that you have the system that companies can talk to each other, permission blockchains. But what if someone, like, the biggest benefit of that might be that it's immutable. But what if someone makes a mistake while he's doing the OCR, and now you can't go back and change it because it's immutable? And then for the Airbnb example, yeah, like, as a consumer, I might save 30% by not using Airbnb. But say I check in and then I go through the process, the smart contract recognizes that I've logged into the Wi-Fi and the escrow gets sent out, but all my sheets are dirty, and now there's no one that I can report to, and I don't want to sleep at the house. So I guess just in general, how are you guys dealing with these trade-offs of being decentralized, having these, you know, DAOs in your businesses?
Who wants to go first?
That's a good question. One of the unique ways that a trade finance is processed is the 4 I's I referred to, right? So there's a large amount of checking that goes on. And it's not actually just between, it's not a one-time thing, because the issuing bank, the beneficiary bank, they all get a chance to check it twice. So there's always going to be human errors, but that's the part we intend to replace with the AI side. So it is an issue, but not so much of an issue for us, I don't think.
So first I talk about situation, why we, in what situation we give protection. So we remove uncertainty when you make a booking online, sight unseen. So we give protection only in that case. And this is when most of bad things happen. So in this case, you may lose all your money. In the situation when you already arrived, usually we assume that if you make a visual inspection, that everything is fine, then you make a decision and then you unlock the funds. When something bad happens, for now, we don't provide any protection right now. And so this is a sort of a trade-off. So we try to solve the case where people might lose a lot. I mean.
Yeah, partially I think that was my fault because I brought the example of that oracle. Everybody knows what an oracle is in the context of a blockchain, I assume. So I brought this oracle idea of the doorknob being the oracle. Obviously, that doesn't mean that necessarily the smart contract is obliged to immediately release the funds, right? There could be a period of time that needs to go by until and when the actually occupant will still have an option to cancel because he has the time to inspect the property. So that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for coming. If you're interested in attending another event, I'll be speaking at an event if you need an excuse to go to Las Vegas. That happens there at the end of March. It's all going to be around identity. I think it's 3 days in total, all just on the topic of identity and the blockchain. So that should be fairly interesting despite me being there. So, and other than that, in 6 weeks from now, as I mentioned, we have another event. We're going to be focused on money over IP. If you know someone who is doing something interesting in this particular space, please let me know. Have a good night.